So yeah, CSS is always an option. There's a couple of problems with CSS, especially when it comes to React. Well, this first one in particular. So this first one is global namespace. And what that means is if you're writing CSS and let's say you write like a paragraph style, that style is going to be applied to all your paragraphs. If you do like a class name, you have a class name like of container, and you do that in one file, it might seem like that container style is only going to be in that one file, but with CSS, every style you write is going to be applied globally, especially since React is a single page application. So once applications grow, that can get a little challenging to manage because, you know, maybe someone a year before you wrote a container class and, you know, stuck that away in some other file. So you have this container style in like a person.css file. And then 1 year later, you write a container class, stick it in like a car.css file. And then you have two containers names who have both these global namespaces. So that can be tricky because then like you can't say for sure what style things are going to get. There's a lot of unused code with CSS, just dead code, just especially with like these big projects that have been, you know, maintained for years. People change CSS and then they might just leave, you know, they might go delete code, but just leave the CSS in there because it can be hard to find. So you have all this global namespace dead code. And like this whole isolation, you can't really, you can't isolate your CSS. It just is available everywhere. And, you know, I think one of the other problems with CSS is it's not really like a programming language. It's just a pretty simple, well, CSS, there's a lot you can do with CSS. I don't want to say it's simple, but you can't do things like functions and have variables and, you know, do if-else statements. So I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of CSS, especially when you're using React, but so that's a totally, it works, it's valid. I know a lot of people who will use it because they feel they're very comfortable with CSS and they're very comfortable with, you know, that with doing stuff with things like class names and IDs and that sort of thing. There's another way to do inline styles, and that's with inline styling. And that's where this is just an HTML thing where you can have the style attribute and you can directly put in your styles there. Now, normally, you know, before React, inline styling was considered just really bad practice because one of the biggest reasons this is a bad practice is you're really not keeping your code dry. And if this is how you style, it can get really messy and really hard to maintain really quick. But when React came along, all of a sudden it necessarily wasn't so bad to do inline styling. And the short answer to why is because, well, you can do inline styling at one spot and then you can just reuse that component. So you're not getting into that issue of duplicating all this inline styling. So I've definitely worked at places where that's, especially with React Native, that's how we did, you know, the last company it was all inline styling. But a benefit you get with inline styling over CSS is now all of a sudden you're in, and since we're using React, another reason that it's more acceptable is it's also with React, you're in a JavaScript file. So you can start writing, you know, your styles as like JavaScript objects and do things like the structure over them. You can now do conditional rendering and like do that with your styles. So, but if we're thinking about just how React works, you know, we have like lifecycle methods, we have JSX. React's really declarative. That just kind of means our code describes what's going on. We have a very strong community. And I think, especially when it comes to UI, I think this composability is, you know, so huge. We can just kind of create these little Lego blocks and then create, you know, a little more complicated Lego blocks, and then we can just keep on building and composing with our components. So today what we're going to be learning about is something that tries to get the best of both worlds kind of with CSS, because there's some good things about, obviously CSS is still how underneath the hood, it's how it's all going to work. It's just CSS. But also how do we kind of get this advantages of CSS, inline styling, but also kind of thinking in React where we're have like this, where we're able to make composable components, reusable components. And so today we're going to talk about a library called styled components. If we look at styled components, just on their GitHub, let's go to their GitHub. Yeah, so if you look at here, you know, it's a pretty popular library. It's got, you know, 35,000 stars. It's used quite a bit. They also have, this is just their GitHub. We can look at their documentation. They also have, you know, pretty good documentation. You can kind of see some of the companies who are using it. You know, Airbnb, Red Bull. So kind of some big names in there. And yeah, they do have great documentation, because styling is something, there's so much to do with styling. It's for me, it's like, I never remember it. It's always kind of looking at documentation, that kind of thing. So let's just go ahead and get started. Go ahead and open up a terminal. And yeah, we'll go from here. So we're just going to do this as just a standalone React app. Just give it a name. So just run our yarn create React app, and then whatever you want to name your project. Something else we'll do today is we'll kind of, because we briefly talked about semantic yesterday, and so we'll talk a little more about semantic today, and also how we can combine something like semantic, which gives us a pretty good starting point, but add maybe do a little customization and combine that with style components. Cool. So once that is done building, you can just go ahead and CD into it. So we're going to add 3 libraries. So the one we're doing today is style components. And then we're going to add semantic as well. So to add semantic, we need semantic UI React and semantic UI CSS. I'll throw that out in Slack. If there's spelling errors or something. All right. So yeah, let's just go ahead and open this up in code. Get semantic setup. So all we need to do with semantic is we add the we add it with yarn, and then our index.js, and just import it. Semantic UI CSS, semantic.min.css. So that's just us importing the CSS file from semantic. Cool. Okay. Start our server. Let's see. Where's that go? There we go. All right. So let's just go to our app.js and class name. Just going to kind of get rid of everything inside of here. And let's just grab some semantic components. So we have our header. Now, something you can do with this is you can give it this as prop. This is kind of specific to semantic. A lot of these component libraries will have this as prop. And I can say as like an H1. Now, what's that is going to do is, was that not reloading? Oh, I actually need to put something inside. Let's do like, we're going to do a little portfolio today. Portfolio. Oh, I have a self-closing tag right there. All right. So what this as does, if I go inspect my element, that's an H1. It gives it the class UI header. I could probably make this like a paragraph. And now my header is a paragraph. It has like some header style because it's getting this UI header class. So So there's two ways this is going to get styled just from how Semantic is. So Semantic has some default styling for like paragraphs, but then it also can have like this UI header class, which will have different styling. But yeah, so you can determine what kind of element you actually want that to be rendered as. Sweet. And now we're going to use a segment component. Header as h2, so I can have like a smaller header. You can also throw in a text align prop here. I'm going to center it. Align equals center. Let's grab another segment. Let's see, text align equals center. Okay, so for this, so there's our, did I spell segment wrong here? Oh wait, no, I just have, yeah, my portfolio, and then I have these, that's just a header, but then I have these two headers within segments, so they have a little bit of like a border. And notice how the header is a little smaller since these are H2s. Another thing, like let's say let's go in and like now see what styled components allows us to do. Let's say instead of using this div, I want to create a component. But I'm just going to do this here so we can see. I'm going to create a styled component right here. App. I'm going to call this app container. And to do this, I need to import styled from styled components. Then I can say style dot div. Then I'm going to give it backticks. But the nice thing here is now inside of here, I can just write CSS, like normal as is CSS. Because really what's going inside of here is this is just a string. And that's going to allow me to just do, I don't have to do camel case, I can just write normal CSS inside of here. So I'll just, like, I don't know, if I wanted to do something like a linear gradient CSS. This is, I'll select this thing out. You can kind of pick your own gradient. So something, yeah, I can do here is, you know, if I want to do like a nice little gradient, and use this as like a little, you know, playground to kind of get the gradient I want, and then it will like generate the CSS for me down here. And you can like kind of maybe pick some other ones. So I kind of like this one. Just have it be more subtle. There we go. Oh, it's pretty obnoxious. Anyway, just come in here and pick one out. And then yeah, you can copy this CSS. And like I said, since with style components, now I don't have to go in and, you know, make this camel case, or I can just use CSS right here. So then I can take this app container and now treat it just like a React component. Go back to my app. There we go. There's my lovely gradient. And yeah, this is just CSS, so I could come in and do like some other stylings. Like maybe I want this min height 100 VH. Let's see, just to make this go all the way down. So the VH is viewport height. So that's just saying, hey, make the min height as however big the viewport is. You know, I could also come in here and do some margin. Let's do some padding. So yeah, and at the kind of just base level, here's what we're doing. We are able to, we're kind of combining these two things of, you know, being able to write just CSS, but also do it in a React kind of way. I'm just creating this styled component. All right. So let's just keep building on this. This really isn't trying to make this look pretty. This gradient's going to drive me crazy in like 30 minutes. It's pretty bad, but this is more just kind of showing you how to do some things with style components. So let's just keep going. So let's say I don't want these to be white. Like that's just kind of like the default styling. Well, we kind of saw with our header, we could make them as an H1. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another style component. I'm going to call it transparent. Transparent. And I'm going to equal this to a styled dash div, and then do my backticks. And for this one, I'm just going to do background transparent. And then I'm going to show this as transparent. Or actually, no, not as, sorry, not as the string. I need to do it as the component. Let's look at that. This is still not transparent, but I want to kind of inspect this and kind of look at it. 'Cause maybe another thing I could do is just be like, see if I can give this a height. So let's see if it, okay. So what I kind of want to show is this height is working, but my background transparent is not. So like, I know this is how I have this set up is working, like as far as the style of components and doing this as transparent is working because it is actually applying the styles. But why is this transparent not being looked at? Or why is this not being applied? So what I can do, just to show this, I'm going to inspect this right here. And you know, with this, when I'm on my elements and on this right side, I can kind of look at what styles have been computed. Like the background color is white. But then I can also see this transparent style right here that I added, and see how it says transparent. Let me just show you, like if I switch this to red. Let's see, I need to come in here, inspect this one. If I do background, where is it? See there, it's red. So this is also just how like CSS and styles work. It's kind of, so behind the scenes with style components, it is creating some CSS and but if you notice this one's getting priority, because what's happening is it has two styles for background color. And then CSS has some rules to like determine which one should get applied. And it is picking this one. So it's getting the white color from the semantic min.css file. Now, if I really want this to be my style and I want to like, I'm not sure how to override it, we can fall back on this. We can say important. Do a bang and then important. And now that important is going to take priority. So I can take that back to transparent. So important is, I would get in so much trouble at my last place if I use at Teleperformance if I used important. Not like in trouble, like my boss would just give me so much shit if I use this, because it can be considered bad style to use this. But I will say this, when you're working with like a CSS library and you're working with style components, it's sometimes all, kind of just what you have to do. So this isn't so bad because I just need to, what I really want to do is just overwrite the semantic CSS.
So did you have to import styled after app container?
Yes. So I import it right here.
Okay, mine wasn't automatically importing it, so I couldn't see that.
Yeah. So yeah, you're going to use this as you're working with these libraries like Semantic or Bootstrap or whatever material. So that's one way you can get around that. These, and like I said, this isn't such a big deal with React. I'm saying if you're just doing an HTML page and if you had just a vanilla HTML and vanilla CSS, you should avoid using the important keyword. Because what happens when, like, importance there to like kind of override everything, but what happens when you have two rules where they're both using important? Well, now you've just kind of destroyed that keyword. It's not going to work. I don't know. CSS is a little bit messy like that.
At some point, are you going to show us about installing fonts with React? Or is that something you can even do?
Installing what?
A font? Or like, is there a list of available fonts?
Oh yeah, let's do that right now. I think that is easy enough. So one way, so first of all, with something like Semantic, they're definitely giving us their default fonts, I should say. But if you want to go pick your own, I'd say one of the easiest ways is just there. You can go to Google Fonts. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but I think this one gives you a lot of options. And these are also free. Some fonts you have to like pay for. These are all free fonts. And so yeah, you can come here. Let's just get like a really obnoxious one so we know.
That did kind of bring me to a question, James. Do you ever run into problems when you're working on like with a company with like the copyright of the fonts or the photos you're working on? Because like you can't just pull photos off Google and put them on your website, right?
No, yeah, you definitely can't. There's a lot of like stock photo places like that where you can definitely find free photos that are you know, you can use them, or you can like pay, like a lot of places have like a small fee to like go, you know, there's tons of websites that here's some stock photos, it's maybe like $10 a month. With something like this, these Google fonts, these are all open source, like these are free to use. It is surprising how much stuff is just free to use. So yeah, with these, you can just kind of come in here, you pick one. I'm gonna pick this cursive one just because we'll know it's being applied. Yeah, I can add these. So some of them have like, you can have like, they're specific for like, you'll have to do like the regular 400. So that's just like the normal one. Then you might want the bold. So you can just add them both. And then what you'll get is this will give you this link to link to this font. So you want to copy this link, and then we're going to go to our HTML page, index.html, and in your header, in the head section, throw that link in there. And then that download, that's like when your index.html page loads, that's how it's going to like go download the fonts so they're available. And then you can just use this font family, and then that's the name of it. So that's the CSS rule. So if I then go to like my app.js, let's see if it'll apply if I throw it here. No, I might need to add that to the header actually. Let's just do it as let me try one more thing if this needs to be important. Nope. I think I need to go do this in my header. Or we're going to change this in 1 second. So let's do it. Let's try doing it this way, just in our index.css, just to see if it's working. Just do a star. Oh, I need to go copy back this font family. I'm still probably gonna have to make this important.
Should we just comment out the CSS that's already in there? Would that be easy?
We can comment out this. I mean, this CSS, this is like what React has generated for us. There's not that much that React has generated for us. But are you thinking about so we don't have to use the important keyword?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so that we can't do because really what is doing all of that is this right here. We're importing the semantic min.css. If I comment out that, then I'm going to lose, like I lose all the semantic styling. So that would kind of, so it's like I need to import that CSS, but then when at given times, I'm going to have to override it.
Since we're on this topic on fonts, isn't there some like computers that doesn't display the font that we're choosing? Do we have to be careful what fonts we choose?
Yeah, so with this, with Google Fonts, how Google Fonts work is, I go back to my index.html. So this one is actually going to go like download the font. Because yeah, your computer might not have the font, so then it wouldn't work. So, but with Google Fonts, it's going to download it. So this also is, you know, you want to use this sparingly because this might take a second to go download those fonts, and then that's something else that's going to have to load every time your page loads. There's also in the CSS, it's kind of what we're doing here with this second argument, this cursive, saying, hey, if for some reason that didn't load, use cursive, and then cursive might be close. That's like the default cursive, so it's like kind of going with that vibe.
Oh no, I meant like if someone is using like, let's say like like a regular Dell computer instead of a Mac, wouldn't some fonts not display?
Yeah, that might be true for like some, like kind of the default faults. I think like ones like cursive and like those are pretty standard. I think when you get to like the font list, yeah, I would definitely not know off the top of my head like which
I think
ones.
the problem there might be like older browsers, like old Internet Explorer browsers might not like it and stuff.
Yeah, but this one with Google Fonts, it doesn't matter. Because you're downloading the font. That's what this link is like, linking to Google, and it's going to download it. So they should be able to get it. Like, because my computer doesn't have, like, if I don't have this link here, I'm pretty sure my computer doesn't have this font. It might get cached. I wonder if it gets, yeah, see, without downloading that, it doesn't work. Because I don't, doubt my computer doesn't have this font. So by default, like if I don't import it, like that's not going to work. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's.
So that is one of the nice things about Google Fonts. You kind of, you don't have to worry about that issue. Cool. So I'm going to get rid of this style so we don't have to see that cursive. But yeah, maybe we'll go pick out another font here in a second. But what I do want to do is kind of maybe clean up this header text. I think there's, you know, maybe I want to kind of use this header, but I want to kind of add my own styles to this. So I'm going to do a const header text. Header text. This is going to be a style dot, just call it h1. So that'll be a h1 by default. And so I'm going to do color white. We're going to be important. And we can do this text align center. Yeah, now instead of doing this as an H1, I can do this as a header text. I don't need this text align center anymore because that's part of my styling. Text align, I spelled align wrong, text align center. What did I do to this one? Oh, I need to do the as transparent on that other segment. So now have some header text and it's white. But now since I did this styled H1, I've kind of lost that thing I wanted where the sizes are different. So now I want to change, you know, the size of this. Well, and you know, also since all of these are all like headers as header text, why don't I just make this a header text component? Clean this up. That's cleaning up my code. And there we go. So, but doing that, I'm kind of, I lost my size thing because this one's now, they're all the same size. So yeah, I want to now have this header text, but now I want to be able to, you know, maintain this white color, maintain this center text line, but I want to be able to change the text. Well, you know, with CSS, we'd probably give it a different class name, or we'd have to give it, you know, as an H1 or as an H2, which once again, I think that gets messy. The nice thing here, we're in a JavaScript file. And style components is going to leverage that and allow us, you know, to pass props to this. So what I'm going to do is, let's just do one demo right here. Let's just say I give this a large prop. Now, I don't know, I can't think if we've actually seen this before. Normally, when we pass a prop, right, we give it a value. Like, I just want to say, you know, this has a prop of large and that value is like true. But I really don't need that. It doesn't have to have a value. Maybe I just want to say, hey, this has the large prop. It doesn't need a value, it's just there. Because what I'm going to do down in my style div is I'm going to come and declare a font size. Pixels. Or I want this to be like, you know, 20 pixels, depending on it, whether it has that size prop or not. Well, remember the backticks, I'm just in a string. So what I can actually do here is I can do some interpolation. Now I'm writing JavaScript. And what I can do here, and this is like little like thing style components is going to handle for me, is I can come in here and pull off props right here. And I'm just going to see, hey, do I have a large prop? If I do, let's have this be 4 relative m's. Now let's have this be 2 m's. And then I can finish off my important here because that's probably going to need to overwrite semantic. So now I can start writing, and this is really cool. I can write CSS, but all of a sudden now I can like write like a function inside of here. So now I can do like some conditionally styling. Like, do I have a large prop? Well, let's make the font size 4 rems. If not, let's make it 2. Sorry, I forgot there are 2 rems. Now I go back, now my portfolio has that large text, my projects and contact. Those have, you know, the default 2 M's. What if I had more, like, what if I wanted to do more than just a large prop? I wanted to have different sizes. Well, I could, like, let's say I want to like have like a font size now, where this does want a value. So maybe I want like large, medium, and small. I want to handle a couple sizes. What I could do here, I'm just, because once again, I'm just in JavaScript, so I'm just going to write a function font size. This is going to take a size. I'll do a switch statement. So switch on size. So if the size is large, return 4 rems or RM. We'll do a case medium, return 3 RMs, and then we can have a default 2 rems. So this is just a function that's going to take a size and, you know, it's kind of expecting, you know, if it's large, if the size is equal to large, it will turn 4 RM. If the size is equal to medium, it will turn 3. If it's anything else, it's going to return 2. So now what I can do inside of here is inside of this function, I can just run this function and do font size, call my font size function and give it props dot, what do I call it, F size. I spell medium wrong. What's the right way to spell medium? So now now I'm able to do a large font size, a medium font size, and a small font size. Now I've kind of been doing these in a separate file. I mean, in the same file, just so we can kind of see this. I'm probably not going to want to do this here. You know, I might create a folder. Sorry, go into my source folder, maybe create a new folder. Components. And maybe inside of here, have that header text component. I need that function for this, so I'll go ahead, take that inside of here. I could maybe like export this function and down here, export default header text. And so then in my app.js, I can now just import header text. Oh, style is not defined. So in my header text, I just need to import styled. Likewise, I could do that with these transparent and app container components. Let's create those, should probably be their own files. Let's do this. Let's do just a little. I'm gonna call this like export import demo. I think we've kind of brushed over exports and imports. Let's look at exporting and default and importing in a little more detail. Now, this is not the way I'd want to do this. I would want to create like separate files for these components and have those files match. But let's just show how this might work. I could do an export const. Export const. So when we export things, we can export as many things as we want from a file. I could export a function. Export const. Yo. But I can only export default one thing. It can be whatever. So I can have multiple exports, but can only have one default export. And let me import, since we're using styled in here, I need to import styled. So now if I want to go to my app.js, I need to import this app container. I need to, what else did I do? Transparent. So notice how my exports that are not default, they're just the mini exports. I do those in the curly brackets. I also had a yo here, right? Yo. And that was just a function. Hi is not defined. Oh, let's go back to my export. Let's tie. Let's export default. See, I'm logging my yo. So I had to define that first and then export default that. If I go back to my app.js, so that's how I can grab my exports. If I want to grab that default one, that is outside of the. Why am I? Let's do it this high combo. So if I want to grab that default one, I grab that first, and that's outside of the brackets. Now we're logging high. Let's say, because this might start to happen. Maybe like I'm importing a header from Semantic UI, but I also have my own component name header. Let's just do that. Just gonna copy this, doesn't really matter. I just want this to export a header. So now I'm exporting a header, which is, well, now I'm gonna run into an issue because I'm importing two headers, like they have the same name. So we can rename stuff. If I want to rename something, I can just change it here. I do a bracket, I do a colon, and then I can say change. What's that doing? Use syntax error. Oh wait, sorry, no, it's as. So I was thinking of ES60 structuring. I use the as keyword. And now I'm going to import that header, but I'm just changing the name and I'm calling it change. To call it taco. Like my header. So, and the reason you might do that is just so it would have a different name than another one. If you want to rename your default export, you can just actually call that whatever. That still works. You don't even, when I export this, you don't even need to name your default export. Just to show you this. I could export default this anonymous function. It doesn't have a name. It's unnamed function. And then when I import it, I can just call it whatever I want. And that works. So now when you're kind of going through your imports, you can kind of see, and let's ignore like the CSS or anything that's not JavaScript. So remember with our imports, if we don't have an extension on our file, we can assume it's a JavaScript file. And also if it doesn't have a path, like a relative path, you know that this folder or whatever is going to live in your node modules. This is probably actually importing it from, there's another thing where it's really probably getting this from the index.js, but that can also be omitted. We don't really need to worry about that. Just know if it doesn't have a relative path, it's importing it from that node modules folder. But now you can kind of look at this if I asked you, is styled, is that a default export? That's a default export. What about like header and segment? Those are not. Yeah, then you know, like if you want to like remember, if it's a default export, you can call it anything. Don't know why you would do that in this case, but it would work because you can call it, you can name it anything. I'd say the only time you really want to change the name is probably if to avoid a duplicate name. If you happen to be importing two things with the same name. So there's just a little side note on imports and exports. I'd say let's stop. Let's take a little break here. Does anyone have any questions on this so far? I'm gonna get rid of these unused imports.
So if you're doing something that's not with CSS and you wanted to export a particular function and not just operate by the export default, is that another way to do it besides using like props or something?
Yeah, this is, yeah, because it's not really, you can't really do anything, yeah, with that. You're saying you're not doing things with CSS. Would you still
Right,
want to do that?
like if you just had a component page that had a bunch of functions on it, and then, you know, that all led to the end result, could you export? I mean, maybe that wouldn't make sense if you, because it would be like functions inside of other functions. So could you export a function that was inside of another function and then just pull that off and use it on another component?
Yeah, I think what you'd likely see is maybe you would have, I mean, there'd be lots of examples, but let's just say we have like a helper folder, and inside of here we have like a math.js file. So let's say we're doing a lot of math here in our app. So I want to have a const add function num1 num2 that I'm going to use this because I'm going to use this. Let's do like I don't know, this is like a big num add where like we have to like add really big numbers, and there's a lot of work involved with this. We're just going to say it's simple for now, but like let's just say this is a complicated function, like lots of checking here. But I want to use this in multiple, like I want to do this in multiple parts of my app. I could write this function here. And then in the rest of my, like in my React component, you know, for some reason here, like I'll click. Do math. Then I'd have like my const do math function. And then inside of here, I do my, you know, my add function. So what I'm doing is I'm having all of this complicated work done inside of this file. So I can write all these functions, you know, maybe I have like a big minus, where I can write the functions here. So I don't have to do all that work inside of my component. And then I can reuse this big num add, big add minus. when we get into hooks, we're gonna have like our own hooks folder where we have like all of the like our hooks code, and then we export our hooks, and then we can use our hooks in whatever component we want. That's like when we write our own custom hooks. But this is one way that's like, yeah, has nothing to do with CSS. I'm writing a whole bunch of my code, like maybe these, you know, a little more logic, just kind of nuts and bolts type things, doing these in their own separate file. So then in my app or my other components, I can just call those functions. You know, and because if this math thing was like lines of code, then, you know, I'd have to do all of that inside of here. But by throwing that in its own function, it does two things. It's going to clean up this component. And then also wherever I want to use this num add, there might be 20 other components where I want to do this. You can just import that function. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Another thing with styling, just to show you like, or it's not even with styling, but styling is a good example of this is, I might have a file. Let's just call this like shared. I don't know, shared. I'm just gonna call this, sorry, the styles, whatever. So we've been doing a lot of like this type of stuff. So if I look at like my components, my header text, you know, I'm using like this white color. Like I'm hard coding the word white. Now, what if that is like my primary color? Like, you know, I want this to be, I don't know, blue. Like whatever my primary color of my app is, let's say it's blue right now. And then, you know, somewhere else, I have another component that's just like paragraph text, and that's also using blue. And, you know, and then I have 100 other components that for their color, they're using that primary color, which is blue. And then, you know, 3 months from now, someone says, hey, I want to change that color from blue to light blue. Well, then I have to go through and find all those, like wherever it says blue, and change that to light blue. So what you'll like see is, oh, let me rename this. You might have like a JavaScript file where we have a const primary color. And we set the value there. And then we export that. Because, you know, then we could have like a secondary color. And so forth. So now I'm only hard coding that blue variable once, like this blue. I'm only going to use that once. And then in my header text, I can come in here and just interpolate that. Primary color. And do that there. So now I can just import that color. Now all of my, wherever that style is, that blue style, it's not using that hard-coded blue, it's using this variable. And all this is just a variable. It's just a const whose value is blue. So now that's blue. But now if this needs to be changed to light blue, I just need to change it in one spot. I don't know if that's a color. That's not a color. Is it light blue? Now it's light blue. So yeah, and then, I mean, it's, your styling gets to look very codey. But this is nice since we're in JavaScript. You know, this gives us a lot of that freedom and flexibility to treat, you know, this like code. Where we can use variables, we can do functions, we can create these components, and just really, you know, start creating these complicated UIs. But at the same time, we're still like, this is, you can just think of like this header text component. This is like a small Lego piece. Now, there might have been some work going into building it, and there's some complexity here, but then when we use it, it's pretty straightforward. I have this header text component, and then I can give it a font size prop to change the size of it. And yeah, if I want to change the color, so that's pretty bad. Go back to white. Let's change my primary color. Sorry, we're going a little late. Any more questions on that? I think we can take a break, but does that help explain, like, you're going to be like, when you look at a lot like really big projects, they're doing a lot of stuff like this. Like you might have like something like a styles file that has like, is exporting just tons of styles, and then you go use them elsewhere in your code. You're also going to be doing things like exporting, like creating functions, you know, that are doing very specific small things, and then exporting them and then using them in your code. And this just has the effect of, you know, it's kind of building these, like, and this is just the thing with code. It's like the more you can break stuff up and create a function and then reuse that function, the cleaner and easier your code's going to be able like to read and to use. It's the same thing with styles. It's not an easy thing to do though, so it takes practice. But let's take a break. We kind of went a little longer, so I'll give you a little longer break. Let's come back at 11:10. Also create a repo and push this up. All right. Let's go ahead and do keep going with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new component. I'll just do this in the components folder. I'm just going to call this projects. .js. .js. And let's do a little bit of a review from yesterday. And so I'm going to build this as a class component. And then we'll also talk about how we can maybe do a Axios call as well. So this will be projects extends React.component. And then we can just do our render function. Return some JSX. I'll just kind of stub some out right now. H1 projects. Like eventually want like the projects list right there. Yeah, we can export default projects. Cool. And then in my app.js, just throw that component right here. So make sure you import that. There we go. Project, there's our component right there in this project, my project segment. Sweet. So with this, we're going to do an Axios call. So you don't have to stop your server, but if it's running and you need the terminal, we're going to do a yarn add Axios. Start up our server again. So something we did not talk about yesterday was how to do a Axios call with a class component. Because normally we would do that in our use effect function. To have that run, because we want the Axios call to run when our component mounts. Well, there is a, just kind of as there's this render function in our React component that like knows how to like render this to the DOM. This one we have to define, but there's other methods since we're extending React component that we're going to have available to us. And one of those is component. And you can see that like this autocomplete's already like looking for component did mount, component did update, component will unmount, component did catch. So these are kind of these predefined methods. So this is a function. This function will run after component mounts to DOM. Refresh. So I get that mounted. So this is where we're going to do our axials call. Now, the other thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have some state. So what we're actually going to do, we're going to do an axials call to GitHub. And we're going to grab some repos. So state equals. Let's also, just since it's in the notes, I'm going to say this is the old way of an axials call. Because remember, like we've been using this async await syntax. This is relatively new. So we're going to do it without async await. And I think I briefly went over this, but let's just do it again. So we're going to do our axials.get, we'll do our URL here. And then we do a dot then. Just going to grab the response and then we can run a function. You can also do a dot catch, which we give a function to run if an error is thrown. So we have an axials.get, we give it the URL, then we do a dot then, and the dot then takes a function that's going to be called when the promises resolves. And then whatever is given back from our API call will be stored in this res variable. We can also do a dot catch. If there's an error that occurs, then the dot catch will be thrown. And this function inside of there will be run. So this is how you had to do this before. I think async await is like 2017, 2018 feature. So it's relatively new. So before that, you had to do it this way. So inside of these, this is, successful. And then this is error handling. So this is where we can do our set state. So this dot set state repos res dot data. Now, if we wanted to handle an error, we could maybe have some error state. This dot set state error is error. Have you just maybe looking at Stack Overflow or examples? I'm sure you've probably seen this dot then dot catch syntax. Maybe like it's async await is somewhat new. So I'm sure you might see this. This is doing the same thing. It's just, if I were to do this with async await, it would be, let response equal axios.get. And then if I wanted to do error handling, I'd throw that in a try catch. That's how that would look if we did it as the same thing's going on right here. We're using the .then .catch syntax. This would be the async await. And then I'd have to make this function async right up there. Async. Oh wait, sorry. To do this one, I use the async right there. But we're not making that async, so we'll just leave it like this. All right, so I'm going to slack out this URL because we're not going to create a repo, or we're not going to create an API. We're just going to use GitHub. Oh, there's not defined. Sorry, let me fix this there. Line 5. Let's have that be null by default. So the URL I just slacked out is, this is actually GitHub has an API. And notice how they're appending how they have their API work. They append their URL with api.github, just to let you know, hey, this is an API, just kind of the convention they are using. But if you put your GitHub username there, so your whatever your handle is or whatever you are on GitHub, and you hit enter. Now I'm doing with the browser, I'm just doing hitting their API. So that's the response of this API call. Just grabbing all my repos. So this is going to be res.data. It's going to be an array of repos. And if we look at the repos, those are just a object. I mean, let's see if we can find, there is one repo. So that's all the data on one repo. So I can take this URL right here, throw that inside of there. And then I should be able to now look at my components, go look at this project, see my state. There's my repos. So that's my current state. My error is null. My repos, it has an array of, I think it's like the most like 30 recent repos. And there's one repo. Now, I'm gonna move this call. I'm gonna create a function called get repos. I'm just gonna do a little refactor, clean this up a little bit. It's essentially gonna take all of this code, this Axios call, and do this inside of here. I'll get repos inside of here. So I just created a get repos function, and I'm going to do it inside of, just do that Axios call inside of here. So that should work the same. If I go to my components and inspect, I can see those are there. I'm going to say this though, like, so you remember whenever we save, it refreshes our page. So whenever we make a change and we refresh, that's going to reload our page automatically. That's hot reloading. You know, is going to cause our component to keep on getting rendered. And, you know, this, we might have an API limit. So we're not using one of our backends. We're actually using GitHub to do this API call. Now, GitHub might have an API limit. Like they might say, hey, you know, you can do like 60 requests in an hour. If you go over that, this won't work anymore. So if that is the case, like hot reloading and API limits, you know, not a good combo. Because you might hit your limit pretty quick. So I'm just going to comment that out. I just wanted to show you how to get data with a class component. So you have that example. But I want to get this a different way. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a button. Let's go ahead and import that from Semantic. Let's just say get repos. Let's just do this on a click. Then on click, get repos. This dot get repos. So now instead of getting my repos on mount, I'm going to wait for this button to be pressed. Cool. So now if I go check out my projects, I can see, you know, the repo state is just an empty array. When I click get repos, now there they are. So let's go ahead and let's kind of do what we did yesterday, where we're maybe trying to decide what we want this to look like. So we have a whole bunch of data to work with, and we have, you know, these repos. I kind of want to just create like maybe you do some cards. So what I'm going to do is maybe let's look at Semantic UI React and maybe just look at their, maybe try grid. Or let's look at the cards first. So we can just come in and create a card. Maybe I'm just going to open up one of these basic ones like in Code Sandbox and start designing or what I think I would maybe want a repo to look like. Let's see. Actually, that's not quite what I want. But this is an interesting way. If you can get your data to look like this, look at this is really clean. You can pass a card group items, just give it that items array, and they'll give you that. But I kind of have to match these. I have to have a header key, a description key, and a meta key. I don't want to be that specific. I want to have a little more flexibility. So let's look at this. I think that looks like a little more close to what I want. So I'm going to open that one up. And yeah, what I like to do is I just kind of like to clean this up as much as I can. Like I don't need all these cards right now. I don't really need this image. Just trying to think, maybe all I really want. Let's see if we can just like get away. Don't need those buttons. I don't know if I need the description yet. Just maybe leave it like that for now. So now I have a card. So instead of here, like I might have like my repo name. And maybe do like in here, the repo description. I don't know if I want this yet or not, but it could be something like that simple, where I just have like my repo name and a repo description. So I can take this card. Oh, crap, I should have named this. I'm kind of, so I'm doing something, I'm being a little nitpicky here, but I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm trying to see, should I call this projects or repos? I guess it's fine to call it like projects, because I think maybe a lot of people won't know what a repo is. Projects like a more kind of universal word. If I said my repos, a lot of people would be like, what the hell is a repo? So I guess we can leave it like this. And then what I'll do is create a new file and call this project.js. And I'm just going to make this, let's just do this as a functional component. Let's import React from React. Now I'll select this out since I kind of just did that in Semantics. So here's kind of just my stubbed out card component that I'm using to create a project. And then, oh, I forgot to do this, do an export default. Sweet, and now for my projects. Let's see here, let's maybe do. Let's actually maybe do look at it, the grid, because that's what we're using in the notes. So I have my card, maybe instead of using this card group, maybe I want to try using the grid component. So with grids are kind of nice because it can give us a lot of control on how much space something is going to take up, like how much width should it take up. So I think let's just do a little demo with this in Code Sandbox. So what I'm actually going to do is let's wrap this in a grid right here. I'm going to auto import that. Okay. I want to see if I can get rid of this thing right here. I just want to get rid of that official documentation stuff. Okay, so there's my repo. There's my card. So now I have a grid. So what I'm going to do is I can, for these, I'm going to wrap this in a grid row. Let's just close this and then I'll move it. So I'm going to have a grid and then all of this is going to be wrapped in my grid row. Let's say we have like, because now I kind of want to try to do some, like have multiple cards. Let me make this a little wider. So what, if I look at the here, we see, oh, get away from props. So I have a grid, then I have a grid row, and then all the things I can wrap inside a grid column. So let's go ahead and do that. So each card I'm going to want to wrap. I'm going to delete these cards because I'm just going to recreate them. I want to do this in a grid. Grid dash dot column. And then, so each card is going to have this column. Let's really screw that up. So I think something else I need to give this is how wide do I want this to be? So if I said width, let's just try like 8. And for this grid column, let's do like 4. So and most of these CSS frameworks are going to have this like this grid system. They kind of vary in how they use. So Semantics Grid, if we look at it, they have a, we look at their props. They kind of base their grid on a 16 numbered grid. Most of them are 12. 16 is kind of a weird number to pick, but they have a 16 grid based system, which means you can kind of think about this as there's 16 columns going down. So if I say this grid column's width is 8, that is essentially saying, hey, take up 8 divided by 16 or half of the grid. If I say the width is 4, that's going to be 4, take up 4 of those columns out of the 16. So that's 4 out of 16. That's the same as saying 1/4. And these are going to be responsive. So since I have a card, that card is messing it up. Let's do this on the grid. Let's do a style. Where's my 1 pixel solid red? We'll give this my grid column. See how as my window grows, this one has that width of 1/8. So that's always going to take up half of the grid row it's in. So I could also give this a border just so we can see the grid row. Let's get that a green. Now I'm running into another thing where the card is not actually, the card by default does not take up the full width of the grid, but the grid is saying, hey, this one should be 8, take up 8 columns. Does that make sense? I could kind of just show you this a little more clearly if I just comment this out. This one. This is the best way to kind of see the grid, is if I just do a basic grid column, close that off. And just, come in here, let's do 2. If I do this 8 times, 2 times 8 is 16. Maybe I need a little padding of these. I think there should be something on here like a padded. You could give these a padded prop. I wonder if there's like a gutter. Let's see if padded does this. I just give this a padded prop. Or does it need to be on my row padded? Grid. There should be a way to like throw some padding on here. Oh, there we go. I had to throw that on the padded prop on the grid itself. And now if I look, I can start to see this grid, and to make it the smallest would be to make all these grid columns have a width of 1. So that's 1, 2, 3. If I did this, that's going to go all the way up to 16. Does that make sense? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And this is dependent on that green, this row it's in, that divided right here, this grid row. So it's just going to take up 1/16 of that. So as my screen grows, those divs will grow. And as it shrinks, they get smaller. They might have like a min width. These are really small to start out with. So with this, you can really kind of create some custom, layouts. So I could say, hey, like this one, I want to take up 8. This one, I want to take up 4. And these last 2 to take up 2. Should put in some stuff here so we can see these a little better. So that's taking up 8. This one's taking up 4. Those 2 are taking up 2. I believe so. If I just throw, like, if I go over, so I'm still in a grid row and I just throw in another one, it's just gonna go over. So what I want to have us do for this is we're just gonna create these grid columns and have them all be 4. And then inside of our grid columns, we can go ahead and throw our cards in there. Wait, I think I threw 2 columns inside of that column. Grid column, grid column. Kind of like that. So, and this kind of does, our cards have a max width, so they might not stretch all the way if this was really big. As we're doing, that's in the wrong one. But when we do a, this is such a mess. Where's my extra card? But the thing here is now I have those cards. Those cards are being like kind of maintained within this grid system that I created. Now it's kind of a little work, but the one thing you get from this is now like responsive. So, you know, if I have a full window, now these cards are going to like go to their full size. As my window shrinks, you know, those are also going to shrink. Let's see here. Trying to think. So I'm trying to find an example here where you can actually change the columns when the size changes to make it a little more responsive. Stackables, a grid can have its columns stack on top of each other after reaching mobile breakpoints. So that might be a good one to throw on here. Let's just see what that does. So if I throw stackable on here, so that's like as it gets to like, maybe this is getting so small, then it's going to stack them. Let's see if I do columns equal to here. Columns, is that going to give me 2 columns? Nope. This doesn't, I thought there was a little more only tablet. Oh, that's obnoxious. So I think we could do it like this. We could have only mobile tablet. We can have this only. So this is only going to run if this is either mobile or tablet. I want to try to find if there's a way other than code. I don't know. I think for now, let's just leave it at stackable, because we could definitely come in here and like do some checking, like, you know, we could have like a screen size, like if screen size, you know, greater than whatever, 1,000, do 4 or 8. So you can kind of get into that logic. I thought there'd be a little more built-in stuff with semantic, but I'm going to just leave this at 4. And then we'll make it stackable. Cool. So what I want to do now is I'm going to add this padded. I'm going to add this grid column to my card. Actually, I'm not going to do that there. I'm going to now map over my project. So this dot state dot projects. Actually, let's do this dot render projects. We'll write that function. Projects. So I'm going to go this dot state dot projects. Or did I call it? I called it repos. See, this is screwing me up. Render repos. I really should just pick a name, but I'll leave it like this. I'm like confusing myself by having both repos and projects here. So I'm going to this dot state dot repos dot map. Go through each of my repos. I'm going to put this grid column here. So I'm going to do my grid column. I need to import that. And then inside of here, I can render my project component. Pass down the repo. And going back to this, like I want to wrap all of these grid columns within these two components. So I'm going to do my grid, then my grid row. Then I'm going to render all my repos, which gives me back this list of these grid columns with the project in the middle. And then I can clean up my grid. Close up my grid row, grid dot row. And then close up my grid. And then I forgot my returns, return this and return this. Working with grids is, it can kind of be a pain. And different libraries have different ways of doing this, but all CSS frameworks are going to have some sort of like a grid system. Cool. Let's see if that's okay. So project is not defined. Let's see if we can import that. Get repos. There we go. You know, they're kind of a pain, but once you get them working, I mean, they're nice because they do give you a nice little grid. If we spent a little more time, I think we could figure out how to make this a little more responsive, but that's, you know, it's kind of nice right there. You know, we get to a certain size, we can kind of change how the grid works, how it looks. So it's not perfect, but for the amount of work we've put in it, it's looking pretty good. Some other things I could do. So let's go to my project. Well, let's do a couple things here. So here I'm just gonna like pull out the things I want. So if I look at my state, or I go inspect my element here, and I look at components, this is all the things I'm passing down or could pass down as props. Because right here in my projects, I'm doing this --r or ..r. So I'm passing all of these things down. So I can use any one of these keys. So I'm just going to look at the notes to see which it is, because there's a lot. So there is the full name. So that is the full name of my repo. So I could pull that from props, full name. There's my repo name, full name. Now it's pulling off all of the full names. I wonder if I can just, I'm just actually going to grab the name. That's going to be a little cleaner. There we go. So there's the name. And then we want the description. Let's see, some of these, a lot of these might not have descriptions just because these are all from the lecture. Let's maybe pull something off since we might not have, or I could go in, what I could also do if I want to get, ones that have maybe full descriptions, I could just change this to like React, Facebook. Let's get all of Facebook repos. Cool. And yeah, that's kind of what I want, because I kind of want to get like some mixed looking data. So we have some repos that have long descriptions, some that have short descriptions. We're still within like our grid system, but now it's kind of looking a little weird, right? So let's see if we can, clean this up a little bit. And let me stop right here and slack this stuff out. So there's the project. And here's projects. Cool. So yeah, we spent some time working on this grid. Now let's spend a little time on these cards, just to make these a little more clean. And I'm just going to do this right here. I'm going to make a like a styled card. So I'm going to do const styled card. So I need to get my styled component. Now, something I can do here is I can either do the string notation, or I can actually pass this another component. And the component I'm going to pass is this, because what I want to do is I want to take this card component from Semantic and I want to give it my own style. So I can do styled, and then instead of doing, an HTML element like H1, I can actually do a React component by just passing it the component. And then I do my backticks to write my CSS. So we could go and we could go style our card and just give it this extra style of like height. And now instead of using card, I'm going to use this styled card component. And now we have, our styled components. They're all of our cards are 200. Some of them, so let's keep going with this. Actually, I think for this demo, if we do full name, let's see if any of these. These are truncated. What maybe I want to have happen is, see how like some of these names are like going on to multiple lines. Maybe I don't want that to happen. Maybe I just want, if instead of going on another line, I just want this to cut off and do like the ... and kind of truncate it. So let's do that. Const truncated. Styled -div. So for this, I'm going to say white space, no wrap. So I'm saying, hey, if this overflows, like don't wrap, so don't wrap the text. And then we can do overflow. So this is like, let's just see what this does. Because here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this truncated component and I'm going to wrap this right here. I'm just going to say, hey, you are truncated. White space, no wrap. Those are still. Oh wait, sorry. Let's do this. I did need I have to say overflow hidden. Why are those not wrapping?
Spelled hidden wrong.
Oh, that's a good point. They're still not wrapping. Let me just see if this is actually styling this. Yeah, that's getting that white space, no wrap. Oh, wait, is that? There we go. There was no wrap. Yeah, let me try this. Okay, so if we have no wrap, that means don't go on the new line. I just said no dash wrap. Another thing. So then, yeah, we can do overflow. So now if it overflows, it hides it. But that's a little hard to see, to tell that it's doing that. So then we can do a text overflow. Ellipses. Let's see. We have like a little ... Let's keep going. Let's say maybe we want to have like some stars. So we could do like another card dash meta. And inside of here, we want to have like a star icon. So let's do this. Let's first just grab an icon from semantic icon equals star, I believe. Icon's not defined, need to import icon. It's not auto, let's just manually throw that in there, icon. So there's my star. Let's just say we want to do something like we want to do an animation effect. So that, because that's something, so when we're talking about inline styles, there's a couple things where inline styles really fall short, where you are going to need to have like some sort of third party to help you with these things. And one of them is animations. Like, let's say we want to do a animation. Like I want this star to rotate. How do we do that? Well, let's look at just animations in CSS. I want to find a better example. So let's just kind of look at, so how this works is we have this like keyframes, and then we give it a name. This is called example. And then inside of here, we can do like a from to. So this is how it's starting, and that's where it's going to. So this one, the background color is red, and then it's going to yellow. And that's the keyframes. And then in our CSS, we can give the animation name that matches the example, and then the duration, 4 seconds. I mean, there's a ton of different things we can do. You can make them infinite. You can, do colors. You can do positions. But this is kind of just the overall, like high level, how we get animations to work is with this keyframes. And then this is kind of telling it where, like how to start and where it ends. So yeah, and this is like, you can't, with inline styling, I don't know if it's possible. I don't think it's possible to do animations with inline styling. If it is, I don't know how to do it. I've never seen it. But we're using styled components, and they have this built in for us, or they have this keyframes for us. So let's say we want to do a rotate effect. So I'm just going to create this variable here. I'm going to call it rotate 360. And I'm going to set this equal to keyframes. Now the keyframes, I'm going to pull off styled components. And then I can do like the, from, and, throw that code inside of here. So transform. So what we're going to do, we're going to transform. We're going to rotate. So this is, we're saying, hey, start at 0 degrees. I wonder if I can, this might not work. Let me just see if I can. Is this going to transform this, just so you can see what the transform's doing? Let's transform this, I don't know, like 30 degrees. I'm not sure if this is going to work on this, but let's try it. Yeah, there we go. So what it's doing is it's taking that element and it's rotating it 30 degrees. So if I did it like 90 degrees, this is kind of how I want to do my animation effect. 100, see how that's slowly going to be like rotating. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go I'm going to start at 0 degrees and I'm going to rotate all the way to 360 degrees. So that's kind of start at the top, but then rotate 360. That's where you're ending. Cool. And then we can come here and make a star style div. So this can be our styled.div. Display. This is just like some ways to make this work. So we're going to do an inline block. We can make it yellow. So we have a yellow star. Let's also do a text. Let's leave the text shadow out for now. Let's do an animation. So I'm going to do this. I need to give it that keyframe. So I'm going to interpolate and do my rotate 360. So that's how I'm passing it that keyframes part. And then I can say, hey, do this for 2 seconds. Have this be linear. So this means like the rotate effect is going to be consistent. And then I can also say infinite. And what that's going to do, it's just going to rotate forever. So it's going to rotate infinitely at a linear time. So it's going to look smooth and it's going to take 2 seconds to go all the way around. And then I can wrap my icon in this star component, the star style div I just did. Cannot access rotate 360 before initialization. So I guess I need to define this first. Those are a little small. Let's see if I can make this bigger with like, not quite sure how to do this. Maybe there's a size prop, size equals large. Maybe I do want that text shadow. It's kind of hard to see. Text shadow. I mean, it is rotating. It's just kind of hard to see. So we can do pixel, 1 pixel black. It's not working. One thing I think that is really a pain with style components is your code. It's not going to cause, like when you write bad code, it's not going to cause an error. It's just not going to work, which I think is the worst, because right now my stars aren't spinning. Why not? Because I forgot a semicolon. So like doesn't break by like it doesn't throw an error, but then your CSS won't work. But now I have that. Now I have some animations going on. I don't know. I'm not sure if this is going to work. Let's just try, see if we can change the color. Maybe go from red to, I don't know, blue. I just don't give that a color. Like that. See, like I'm missing probably. Oh, it doesn't want a semicolon here. There we go. There's my awesome animation effect. But yeah, so I can probably just wrap any, like this star. But the nice thing with this is now I can just probably reuse this star component. Let's see if this works. Like wrapping my whole styled card in this star component. then now that's like that rotate 360 effect. And that's a little much, but it's a nice way to kind of, you know, spend a little time trying to get that working, but then you can reuse that effect. But, really be, I don't know, I think animations, they're like good. It's like salt. You just want a little of it. Just if you go too much, it's going to completely ruin your UI. Like in my mind, that's probably too much to have these spinning stars, but that's how you can do animations. I think animations is definitely something, and one of the nice things about like style components is that's something you can like Google, like cool CSS animations. Let's see here. I want to just trying to just find something that has, or let's just go to like, find some ready to go ones. Here's like a code pin one. So you can go like see other people's animations, look at their CSS. That's a little intense, but I think that's just all CSS animations that's going on right here. Like basic CSS animation examples. So you can do like hovers. That's just something growing and shrinking and moving. Spinners, you can do animations. Spinners are a good one to do with animations. But you know, once you, I think you can kind of come in here, like look for it online. Let me go into CodePen. You know, just explore how they're done. Animations, loading animations. It's like you can come here and like maybe look at some of these animations, go in here, pick off the CSS, and then you can have a nice little loading animation UI. Let's see, what time is it? Is it 12:20 already? Let's take a break. There's a couple, we're about done. Let's take a quick break, come back in 10 minutes. I just want to talk about a couple other things that we can do with styled components. Okay. Let's keep on going. I kind of just want to just talk more about the features of styled components, just so you know about them. So I'm just going to do a new file. Let me share my, I'm screen sharing right now, and call this demo.js. Okay, then export this. I'll just render this in my app. I'm just going to do this right here. There's my demo. Okay. So let's do styled demo. Cool. So something that we might want to do that, once again, we can, I think that the way to really think about styled components is it allows us to write CSS in JavaScript. It's kind of like the same way that, you know, in React, we can write HTML in JavaScript. Now, styled components allows us to write CSS in JavaScript. So with the React and with styled components, we essentially can just do all of this, all of our HTML, all of our CSS in JavaScript, which is nice because HTML and CSS are not really programming languages. They're just, you know, they're kind of like dumb language because there's no loops, there's no variables. So, and yeah, and it has, and like I said, style components has some advantages over inline styling because things like animations, we can do animations, we can do like pseudo selectors. So let's look at that. Let's say like I have a button. So I'm going to make a button const button. It's going to be a styled div. We'll just kind of give this some styling. So we'll display flex. Background. I don't know. Give it a random color, still blue. Give it a color. White. Padding. Yeah, let's try 25 pixels. I'm not really concerned if this looks great or not. So yeah, let's just, and then let's also do like a cursor. This is a good thing to have on a button, so you know you can like point at it, change the cursor. So it goes to that hand. So I have this button component, just styled's not defined, need to import styled. Import styled from styled components. Maybe just for now, I'll give it a width of, I don't know, 100 pixels. So there's my button. Now, what I want to show here is like when I hover over this, I have my hand on there, but it'd be nice, you know, to maybe have the style change when the hover happens. And we can do that pretty easily with style components. What I can do is I can just do an ampersand. And then I can do my pseudo selector. And there's a hover one. So here, just to be like obnoxious, let's just do background red. Just so we can really see this work. So now when I hover over it, I get different styles. So that, there's other ones. There's like, if you have like links, there's other selectors like these, like for links, there's like active, visited. There's a whole bunch of these. So we can use these normal CSS pseudo selectors and we can give them different styling. So there's an example of that. Another thing that you want to maybe do is do what's called a media query. So let's just come in here. I'm going to create just my own little card. It's going to be a style.div. And I'm just going to do a width 200 pixels and a height 200 pixels, and then let's do a background. Let's give some margin of 20 pixels and then a border. So solid black. Okay, so I could have some card components now. And maybe let's just throw these in a div. I can still do inline styling. I could say like display is flex. So now I have some card components. So I might want to, so we were kind of seeing when we were working with the grid here, this was one way we could make something responsive is by using like built-in styles from like Semantic. But what if I want to do my own custom styling based on the size of the screen? Well, in CSS, there's something called media queries. So we can also do that in Semantic. So to do a media query, I say @media. And there's like things like max width, min width. There's a couple of these queries. And I could say @max width, let's just say like 800 pixels. Let's actually give these, so it's a little obvious. Let's once again go with the background color. Let's have that one be still blue. And here it's going to be red. So what this is saying, because right now you notice these are blue. If I go ahead and change the size of my screen, once my screen gets below 800 pixels, then those styles are going to be applied. So if it's big, there'll be blue, but yeah, once it gets to 800, then it, goes down to red. So maybe, like with this container, let's, instead of doing this inline styling, let's do like responsive equals a styled dash div. And I can make this my responsive container, can have this be display flex. But I can choose a size, and I'm not like, maybe if this is less than 500, I can have my flex direction go to column. So by default, the flex, I'll just put this, I don't need to put this here because it's default, but by default, it's going to be row. The flex direction is row. As I make this smaller, so there I pass 800, so those go red. As I get to 500, now when I get to 500, now that switches that display to column. So that's one of the ways how you can, well, media queries is how like you would, if you want to do responsive designs and you want certain styles to happen at certain sizes, you're going to be using a media query. Any questions on that? This is really just kind of like high level, like, here are the things you can do. Media queries. So we talked about media queries, animations, things like pseudo selectors. So yeah, it's really nice because this, once again, this is all in our like JavaScript. So, I could maybe, I can't think of something off the top of my head right here, but if I needed JavaScript, I need to do some check. Like, I could say, hey, props, whatever, something, question mark. I can like write functions inside of here because I'm in a JS file. It gives me a lot of, kind of gives you like a lot of power with that. Just want to see if there's anything else. Kind of think there, there's a lot more, but I do think this really goes over kind of some of the basics, but there's so much, even just with this is covering like the majority of what you can do. Is there something in like CSS wise you trying to think about doing? I think media queries, animations, pseudo selectors. And yeah, let me say that like the one thing with like media queries, once again, I'm having these weird hard-coded numbers like 800, 500. Maybe that's something I should like come put into like decide what those are and then actually use them as like words. So I could do like an export const. iPad. iPad size, or maybe I should say like tablet. And then come in and hard code that. I don't know what they are, but maybe probably somewhere around like 700. 80 pixels. Could go find these sizes, tablet size, desktop. And tablet, we'll just say tablet. Desktop, maybe the desktop is like 1200. Mobile is whatever 500. I'm kind of making up these sizes, but what I can then do is use these variables in here. Instead of saying max width 500, I could say max width. Interpolate this, say and mobile size. Just to kind of create some consistency. So I need to just import that. Go up. I think now those are both at, I believe, 500. So those now both break at 500. So blue, 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 blue. Then once we get to 500, it changes to red and it goes to the column. Let's just look at your homework really quick and then we'll go for lunch. Just want to make sure there's yeah, so for here, for your for this project, what you're going to do is you're going to add style components to your project from yesterday. So today is nice. I think it's nice. It's going to be like, it's like a styling day. So you can work on your project from yesterday and kind of try to make it look good and experiment with styled components. I'd say don't so much try to make it look nice. I would say try to more so to get familiar with what you can do with styled components. Like, because you can spend like hours just like picking out the perfect color. So avoid stuff like that and just really try to like experiment with a lot of the features of style components. So you're going to add style components. You're going to customize some semantic components using style components. So you take a semantic UI React component, but then you can change some things about it. You're going to create your own styled components. So you can create your own, almost start creating your own component library. You can add an animation effect, add the hover and other pseudo selectors. I'm going to say, utilize Flexbox. Try to explore Flexbox a little more. I think it's a pretty useful CSS tool. Do a media query. Yeah, so as a bonus, there's really lots to do here. So you can just, I think this is really just the bonus here is just really kind of experiment, do what you want. If you want like something to try to do as a bonus, you could have all your colors in separate files and import them into your CSS. So what I mean by that is like here I'm using still blue. Like, nope, I want to have that in like a variable. It's like, I don't know, you can name it whatever. Tertiary. Still blue. So you're not using in your styles themselves, in your style components, you're not using those colors. you're using variables that hold those colors. So I need, even if it's something like black, I think like that when it changed, but yeah, even if it's black, you could come make a variable export. Call it black. Set that equal to black. And then instead of using, you know, that hard-coded black, you'll use your variable black. Now that might seem weird, but it's really not, because like I said, maybe down the road, someone says, hey, I want you to change your color of black to a less blacky black or a more blacky black. And if we go to like, so like, I don't want it to be, because I could use the string black, but also what is black is 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. That's black. Or I could do like, you know, maybe they want a little lighter black. So yeah, you could have a black color that's like, this is black. I mean, look at my VS Code. Isn't that like, this background looks black. These all kind of look black. But they're different shades of black. I mean, maybe this is starting to get in the gray realm, but I can tell that this color, like I would say, is black, but this is definitely not that black. Those would be different colors, if that makes sense. It's the same thing with white. Like you can have like a white color that's like not quite white. It's like a very, very beige white that you can hardly tell. Like I would not know if that is actually white or not. And by white, because white would be like FFFF, that's like full white. But if it's FFFF9, that's going to look white, but it's different than that color. So, and trust me, like designers will like geek out on that. They'll be like, should we do FFFFF9 or FFFF? All right, I'll shut up. Let's have yeah. Are there any questions? If not, I think we can hop off for lunch. Any questions on the homework? Let me release this so you can start working on this now if you want. Cool. There's no questions. You can hop off for lunch. Let's just meet back let's just call it 2 o'clock. Have a good lunch, everyone.
Thank you, James.